Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. Earlier today, Paulo Costa posted on social media that he had surgery on his elbow, and this led to massive speculation within the MMA community that Paulo Costa versus Khamzat Chimaev would be canceled, with Paulo Costa being forced off of UFC 294. And this would be absolute devastating news. Now, I want to make it very, very clear there is nothing official yet in terms of a fight cancellation. And when I initially saw the news, I said, oh, they'll probably still fight. This kind of dampens the fight a little bit, and we'll talk about that later in the video, even if it does happen. But I thought it'll probably still happen. We're about 2 weeks away from UFC 294. He's saying this happened 3 weeks ago, so it'll probably still end up happening. But then Paulo Costa went and did an interview on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, and we're going to take a look at a couple clips. I feel like they increasingly get more alarming as the interview goes on, and I'll link the entire interview down below in the description if you want to go check it out. But after watching this interview, I am now convinced, unfortunately, that Paulo Costa versus Khamzat Chimaev will not happen at UFC 294. I believe the fight will get canceled. Again, this is not official news. This is pure speculation based off of the information we currently have. But what we learned in the interview is that it was staph infection. He had this before he left Brazil. He's now in Abu Dhabi. It got worse in Abu Dhabi, and he went to a doctor. A doctor said, look, you have to have surgery. You have to have this cut out. And that was 3 weeks ago. He had the surgery on his elbow. He got it cut out. He got it stitched up. And he's still hoping to fight at UFC 294. But what sucks about this news is this was just such a massive fight for UFC 294. And I feel like even if the fight still does move forward, you have this built-in excuse for Paulo Costa. Oh, well, he's not 100%. Oh, he just had surgery. Even in the interview, in a clip that you're not going to see, he talks about, oh, I'll fight Khamzat Chimaev with one arm. I don't care. I'll fight him with one arm. And I just feel like no matter how you slice this news, it is devastating news for UFC 294, because I felt like this was the most compelling fight on the card. And now Paulo Costa, I know it's this one maybe not his fault, and the other ones really weren't his fault either. There was contract negotiations, but it just seems like every Paulo Costa fight is never bound to happen. You have Paulo Costa versus Robert Whittaker supposed to happen, I think last year, or it might have been UFC 284 earlier this year. He was supposed to fight Robert Whittaker. Doesn't happen. UFC announced it before they had a deal in place with Paulo Costa. Then we get announced Paulo Costa versus Ikram Aliskerov for UFC 291. The second that was announced, when I did a video on UFC 291, I said, this fight isn't happening. And then finally, we get the announcement we all wanted. Paulo Costa versus Khamzat Chimaev, UFC 294. The return of Paulo Costa, the return of Khamzat Chimaev after over a year layoff for both guys. A massive middleweight fight. And now we have all this speculation whether or not it's going to happen. And I truly believe, I would say I'm 75% sure that this fight does not go down at UFC 294. Now, when he went on the Ariel Helwani show, he did the interview. I'm going to play you a clip where Ariel Helwani just flat out asked him, are you still fighting at UFC 294? And this clip itself doesn't tell you all that much, but let's take a look at it and then come back and react to it.
And are you fighting on October 21st?
Yes, definitely yes. Definitely yes. I came to Abu Dhabi 4 weeks ago. I came here early on this hostile country environment, but I came here to take over.
So there you hear Paulo Costa is asked, are you still fighting on October 21st at UFC 294? And he says definitely yes. But then he kind of goes on to almost convince us why he's still fighting. He's like, I'm already here. I've been here. I'm ready to go. And while this itself isn't that alarming, I also took a look at their body language. Him and his coach, Eric, they look almost like, upset. They look depressed. They look like almost like they were coming to make a plea to the MMA media. Yeah, this fight's still happening. This fight has to happen. And we're going to take a look at two more clips that I think kind of more tell the story. But this clip itself, Paulo Costa says, yeah, I'm still fighting. Definitely still fighting, even though I had surgery essentially 5 weeks out from the fight, a little over a month from the fight with Khamzat Chimaev. And again, this clip itself doesn't tell you that much, but the body language, it just seems like almost, yeah, I'm in Abu Dhabi. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to take over. I came to this environment early, this hostile environment early. It just felt like In his mind, he's in denial. That's what it truly felt like. And I didn't think this when I initially watched that first part. It kind of felt like it a little bit, but then when I watched the rest of it, I went back to that original clip and I'm like, oh, well, now this kind of makes sense. Now let's take a look at a second clip where he really starts to sow the seeds of doubt of whether or not he may fight Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 294. Let's take a look at it and then we'll come back and react to it.
I want this fight so bad. That's why I'm still in this fight. I did a surgery, but that doesn't care. I'm gonna be there anyway. These guys need to, he need to run too much to escape from me. I'm here to beat him, and yeah, the only way to not fight him if doctors, drag me out, screaming, kicking me, and not allow me go inside the cage, because I came to fight him, and I truly believe I'm gonna beat him. Doesn't matter. I doesn't care.
So there you hear Paulo Costa say, look, I had the surgery. I'm going to be ready to fight anyway. The only way this fight doesn't happen is if the doctors don't let me go into the cage. And the way he said that, and just the way his body language and his coach Eric's body language, it just almost seems like they're trying to make an appeal to the fan base, to the media, to the UFC, that, oh, we want to stay in this fight. Don't pull us out of this fight. When you have a surgery a couple weeks out from a fight, they have to pass medicals to be able to step in the cage. And now that this is public knowledge, I feel like there's plenty of times where the UFC kind of tells fighters, well, don't say anything to the doctors. You can essentially hide these in your medicals and you'll still be able to fight. I really truly believe Dana White expects all fighters to just step in whether they're injured or not. And he's kind of alluded to that in different press conferences after fights, and not paying certain guys for pulling out if they're sick or pulling out if their opponent misses weight, stuff like that. You can even go back to Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo, which was supposed to take place at UFC 189. Jose Aldo broke a rib a couple weeks from the fight. Dana White was insistent in the media. No, this fight's still on. No, this fight's still on. No, this fight's still on. And then finally, literally like a couple days before the fight, Jose Aldo is like, no, I'm not fighting. And Chad Mendes stepped in. So the UFC kind of expects these fighters to fight if they're injured. But I think Dana White's going to be pissed. I think he's going to be pissed at Paulo Costa that he put this injury out in the media. He's going to blame the media for the fight cancellation, because if now the doctors know that Paulo Costa has an injury, there's no way of basically having plausible deniability. There's a really good chance that the doctors say, look, you have this incision on your elbow. It's still not completely healed up. You're not going to be able to step in there and fight. This isn't good for your health. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that he's 100%. But even if he is able to step in the cage at UFC 294, I worry that this is going to loom over the fight now, because throughout this interview, and I'm going to link the entire interview down in the description if you want to check it out, there's multiple comments that are made. I couldn't clip them all out, but there's talk of Paulo Costa saying, I'll beat him 99 out of 100 times, and I'm going to fight him with one arm. I don't care. It just seems like he's talking to someone else other than Ariel Helwani, and he's trying to set the narrative that I will fight. And what I really think this comes down to is the last two fights for Paulo Costa, the booked fight against Robert Whittaker and the booked fight against Ikram Aliskerov. After the Aliskerov fight cancellation, a lot of the fans were saying, cut Paulo Costa. And what was going on there, Costa and the UFC were trying to negotiate a new deal. The UFC was trying to put pressure on Paulo Costa by announcing fights that Costa did not agree to. And then when the fight didn't happen, the entire fan base would blame Paulo Costa. Well, now we got this massive fight, a fight that Paulo Costa wanted against Khamzat Chimaev. And no matter what, it doesn't matter if Paulo Costa got into a car accident and broke his arm. The entire fan base, and I feel like Dana White will set the narrative, this is all Costa's fault. This is all the MMA media's fault. If the doctors do in fact pull Paulo Costa from this fight, which would be absolute devastating news to UFC 294. But let's take a look at the last clip, because Ariel Helwani asked Paulo Costa directly, are you saying they're trying to pull you out due to medical reasons? Are you saying that doctors are trying to take you out of this fight or threatening to take you out of this fight? And the answer from Paulo Costa, while it's not super direct and there is a language barrier there, this one really just told me I don't think this fight's happening. When I saw this clip, I said Paulo Costa versus Khamzat Chimaev is definitely getting canceled. Let's take a look at the clip and then I'll come back and react to it.
Yeah, and so can I ask you, just to try to be as clear as possible, this could be for anyone in the room, Are you coming on the show now to tell the world that they're trying to remove you from the fight and you want to fight? Or are you coming on the show to tell the world nothing to worry about? You're in. This fight is happening on October 21st.
Yes, I just came to let the fans know I'm ready to fight and not ask UFC nothing. UFC is doing their job. Very good job. They are supporting me a lot. They didn't mention that to remove me from this fight.
So there you hear Paulo Costa when asked directly, are they threatening to pull you out of the fight? He said, I just came on to let the fans know that I'm ready to fight. And I just feel like Paulo Costa, just look at the body language. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm reading into this too much. I wouldn't make this video if I didn't truly believe this. But it seemed like he's trying to set the narrative already. That look, if this fight doesn't happen, don't blame me, guys. Because the amount of heat that Paulo Costa is going to get if he pulls out of another fight, even though I don't really blame him for technically pulling out of the last two fights, if he pulls out of this Khamzat Chimaev fight, it's almost career suicide for Paulo Costa. So I think that's why he's so desperate to stay in this fight. But the entirety of the interview, when you watch it, it's, I only showed you, what, a minute and a half, 2 minutes of the interview? I think it's about 25 minutes long. The entirety of the interview, it seems like Paulo Costa is trying to convince somebody, I'm still fighting. I'm not pulling out. It's not my fault if this fight doesn't happen. That's what it seems like the entirety of this interview on the MMA Hour. And if he pulls out of this fight, I don't necessarily blame him. I don't necessarily blame the doctors for pulling out of the fight. I mean, I'm not a medical expert, so I don't know if he's going to be ready or not. I don't know how long that staph infection is, can spread to other people. I don't know how long it's going to take for that massive incision to heal on his elbow. Supposedly, it's going to be ready in 5 weeks. That's what Paulo Costa says, but you can't really trust everything Paulo Costa says. And I really think in this interview, the body language of both him and his coach told the entirety of the story. And the other takeaway I have from this interview, if you go watch the thing in its entirety, skip through what Coach Eric says. The guy talks and talks and talks and talks and talks. I swear he just likes being on camera. I swear he just likes hearing his voice heard. He never shuts up, and he's like trying to hype up the fight a whole bunch and basically making it seem, and in this interview, this kind of happens too, Costa as well as Eric make it seem like if this fight doesn't happen, it's Khamzat Chimaev running from me. That's what they kind of make it seem like in this interview. But I have a gut feeling what's going to happen is the UFC is going to come out and say, Paulo Costa's not medically cleared to fight Khamzat Chimaev, and now we're looking for a replacement. And I've tried to think up before I made this video, who could step in for Paulo Costa? I don't know who the UFC could potentially put in there. We just had Ikram Aliskerov versus Nasruddin Imavov get canceled, where you had Warlley Alves step in for Imavov. I don't know if maybe potentially one of those would fight Khamzat Chimaev. I doubt it would be Ikram Aliskerov. Maybe they could cancel that fight and put Warlley Alves against Khamzat Chimaev. But this is an absolute disaster. And if this does happen, even though Khamzat Chimaev basically has nothing to do with this, this just shows the gross mismanagement of Khamzat Chimaev's career by the UFC. Because he won, last September? September of 2022, Khamzat Chimaev won a fight against Kevin Holland, took 0 damage. They then wait over a year, 13 months, to put Khamzat Chimaev back in the cage. And now we're 2 weeks away, and it looks like this highly anticipated fight with Paulo Costa is going to get canceled. And I don't know who they find as a replacement. And even if they do find a replacement, it's not going to be as big as this fight. It's basically just going to be some throwaway fight, because imagine coming in on short notice to fight Khamzat Chimaev. It doesn't have the same appeal. And what really sucks about this news in general, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa at UFC 294. But regardless, even if this fight does in fact happen at UFC 294, you have this injury looming over it. You already had Paulo Costa saying, I'm going to beat him with one arm. I don't care. And there was a couple breadcrumbs in this interview basically saying, I'll win. It doesn't matter if I'm compromised. It doesn't matter. I don't care that I just had surgery. And the fact that he put it out there, it's like this is already a built-in excuse. So if Khamzat Chimaev goes out there and let's say he mauls Paulo Costa, we already saw Paulo Costa after the Israel Adesanya fight. I drank too much wine. You'll hear him say, I thought I could win. I had a bad arm and I stepped in there and I ended up losing because of the bad arm. So no matter how you slice this entire situation, no matter how this ends up playing out, it just sucks for UFC 294 in the co-main event, because If you have a Paulo Costa who's 70%, 75%, and he stays in there, it's still not the same. And I know no fighter ever steps in the cage absolutely 100% healthy, but this is devastating news no matter how you slice it at UFC 294. And I truly believe that this fight will get canceled. I don't know who they'll find as a replacement, but it won't be nowhere near as good as the Paulo Costa fight. And now I don't know what this means for the future of Paulo Costa, because I'm telling you right now, Dana White's going to be pissed. They're going to say, why did he even come out in the media and say it? Why did he ever put this out there? I think Dana White will blame Paulo Costa. They'll also blame the MMA media. And unfortunately, the fans will blame Paulo Costa as well. And I kind of get it, you know? It's like Paulo Costa hasn't fought since he fought Luke Rockhold back at, I don't even know, was that UFC 278 when Leon Edwards brutally KO'd Kamaru Usman? And now this is his third straight fight that he's pulling out. It's just, it looks bad for Paulo Costa all the way around, and it sucks because Khamzat Chimaev has now sat out 13 months to get the biggest fight of his career in the middleweight division, a fight that could potentially determine the next middleweight title shot. And now, a couple weeks out, Paulo Costa's posting on Instagram that he had surgery a couple weeks ago. I hate this news. I believe Khamzat Chimaev will not fight Paulo Costa at UFC 294. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.